Now that we've sort of built a foundation behind the concepts of the Settings app and Control Panel, as well as working our way through PowerShell, I want to take a deeper look now at some of the different settings that we can configure in regards to things like the language settings, time and date, our sign-on options, the Edge web browser, search and mobility, and the Windows desktop feature. So I'm going to start by clicking Start and going to Settings. And of course, this again brings us into the Settings app. Okay, first thing I want to look at here, we're going to look at the time and language settings. Alright, so as you can see, this is where you can configure your date and time, your region, language. You can even do speech recording so that it recognizes your voice and the way you talk. So date and time is here. I can set my time automatically, set my time zone, configure my time manually. So again, some more configuration down here. This is more involving the time zone if I wanted to drop that down and select that. Okay, as you can see here, adjust the daylight savings time is on or off if you needed that, and show additional calendar in the taskbar if you wanted to add that additional calendar, you can. We've got region information here. This is where I can select my country, region, regional format, and then language over here. So if I wanted to add more languages, I can do that by clicking here. If you do that, it's going to actually open up a little store, Microsoft Store area, and you can start downloading other language packs if you wanted to. So if there's other languages you wanted to support in your operating system, you could. And then also you can adjust your input method. Now that involves your keyboard. So if you had a special keyboard with different characters on it, and you wanted to switch back and forth between those keyboards, you could. Okay. So over here we have speech. As you can see, you can choose the language you speak with your device. You can actually have it learn to recognize your voice. You can choose different voices when it's going to be speaking back at you. So there's all sorts of little configurations you can do here. All right, let's take a look now at the sign-on options that we've got. Okay, so if we come back over to the main settings homepage, you're going to notice that we have an accounts area right here. And I'm going to click on accounts, and there's an area called sign in options. So I'm going to click sign in here, and we have quite a few little options here that we can configure. The first thing I want to point out is this thing called Windows Hello. So Windows Hello, this is Microsoft's biometric system. This is what will support things like facial recognition, fingerprint matching. You can use a PIN to authenticate. You can have a security key. A password, standard password, which you're probably used to. You can even do like a picture password where you actually put your fingers or use your mouse on an image, and you do it in a pattern, and it recognizes that pattern and it lets you in. Okay, so Windows Hello, again, that's Microsoft's biometric system. This will also help you support what's called MFA, multi-factor authentication, which gets into having multiple ways to authenticate. If you think about it like this, if you were to pair having to log on with a password or a PIN number as well as something like facial recognition or fingerprint matching, this is going to really increase your security, because hackers could, discover your password, but it's going to be a lot harder for them to mimic the pattern of your face or something along those lines, right, to authenticate against your computer. So this is going to really increase your security. And if you're in a Microsoft domain environment, or if you link to the cloud, you can also use something called Windows Hello for Business, which allows your environment to control the different settings on this. So a company could deploy group policies, or they could use something like Microsoft Intune to control the settings for this. There's another little feature here called Dynamic Lock that I want to point out. This is a neat little feature where maybe you're worried about yourself or a user standing up and walking away from their computer and then not locking their computer before they go. Okay, I know I've dealt with users like that. You can actually pair somebody's mobile phone, their smartphone, using Bluetooth to dynamic lock, and when their phone gets out of range of Bluetooth, it'll auto lock their computer for them. So that's another nice little feature that you could implement if you wanted to. Okay. So these are your sign-in options. You've also got the privacy here, show account details such as my email address on the sign-in page if you want that to show up. This is where on Access Work and School, this is where you would link to a Microsoft Cloud if you wanted to, the Microsoft 365 and Azure AD. I'm going to be talking a little bit more about that as we get deeper into this. You've also got other users here if you wanted to add other users to the system. You could do that right here. Add work or school, add someone else. You can synchronize settings between different locations. This is going to be a thing called enterprise state roaming. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. That lets you synchronize with cloud services if you are using the Microsoft Cloud. Okay, so those are just a couple of things here I wanted to show you in settings. We're going to refer back to this as time goes on, but I wanted to show you those settings. I also want to show you that the Edge web browser. I'm not connected to the internet right now, as you can see, but as far as configuring your Edge web browser goes, you just come up here to this ellipse symbol, drop that down, and there's a settings object here you can click on, and you can configure your different settings here for your web browser. And this is not too different than any other web browser in terms of just configuring it. You know, you can configure some of the way that it looks. You can make it your default if you want. You can have favorites and show how your favorites, if they're going to show up in the taskbar. You can configure your download area. There's also privacy and security. If I want to clear browsing history, cookie information, licenses that I've maybe used for media, that's like streaming video and audio, things like that. I've got all these little things here I can turn on and off, referring to the privacy and security if I want. And then I've got passwords and autofill if I want to support that, have passwords plugged in for me, or do autofill, I can. And then advanced, which will let me turn off my Adobe Flash player if I don't want Adobe Flash. I can configure proxy settings here. I'm going to talk more about proxies a little bit later as well. Cortana, if I want Cortana to interact and deal with Edge and make it where I can basically right click and allow Cortana to assist me in searching things or managing something, asking her if I want to configure or look something up, I can do all of that. Okay, so these are just some of your configurations in Edge. Again, if you've dealt with web browsers in the past, you probably know that Edge is, it's a web browser. It works like a lot of your web browsers. I will tell you though that this is the older Edge. Now Microsoft is pushing us into the direction of getting the Chromium version of Edge, which is more based on Google Chrome. Okay, you've heard me say that earlier as well. All right, the next thing I want to show you is a little bit of the mobility settings. I'm just going to go down to the search bar here, and I'm going to type the word mobile, and you're going to see a mobile plans option here I can click on. Now this mobile plans option will allow me to actually pair my computer with a cellular provider. So this is nice if you've got a cellular plan that will allow you to pair your computer with your cellular provider. Then you can actually go through here and go through this wizard and link to a cell provider. And then what you're also going to find is as we go through and we configure some of our settings a little later, you're going to notice that I can have things turned off if I am using a cell provider and I don't want to have that feature turned on. And the reason I might do that is because perhaps that feature uses a lot of bandwidth, and as you probably are aware, a lot of your cell providers, when they provide internet to something like a laptop or a tablet or something like that, they might actually charge you money based on bandwidth. So as you use a certain amount of bandwidth, they end up charging you a fee. So you can configure your mobile settings here if you want. All right. So the next thing I want to show you, one of the final things I want to show you right here, involves this thing called Windows Desktops. So this little icon down here says Task View. If I click that, okay, it'll let me actually go and click New Desktop. Okay, so let me show you this in action. Okay, so let's say I've got a bunch of things open. I'll open Edge, and I'll open File Explorer, and I'm going to open Notepad, and I've got a bunch of things open that I'm working on. But now I've got to switch and work on something else, but I don't want to mess with any of this stuff. I want to leave it on the screen so that I can come back to it at a later time. Okay, so I'm going to click this little task view here, and then notice I've got this stuff open, but I'm going to click New Desktop. All right, and now I've got Desktop 1 and Desktop 2. I can switch to Desktop 2, and as you can see, I don't have all that stuff open anymore. It's almost like I've got a second monitor. I can open something else up here. Maybe if I was working on two different projects at one time, I can have this desktop having project number 2 on it, and the other desktop has project number 1 on it. Okay, so if I want to switch back, I'm just going to click the icon again, switch back to Desktop 1. As you can see, everything is still up. Go back to Desktop 2, everything's still up, and I can create a bunch of these desktops if I wanted and be able to jump between them anytime I want. Okay. All right, so hopefully that gives everybody a decent understanding of just some of the different settings that we've got in terms of the time, date, language settings, sign-in options, some of your edge configuration, mobility, or the mobile settings for cellular support, and then your Windows desktops feature.